Yo, hello, it's Mr. Cho here. And so we'll be going through the last part of the ecology chapter today, and we'll also finish the bio syllabus today. Okay, so in the previous few lessons, we have learned about food chains. We have talked about producers, consumers, decomposers, food chains, right? How energy is lost between the different trophic levels and why a short food chain is better. And then we have talked about the non-cyclical flow of energy. We have learned how to draw a pyramid of numbers and a pyramid of biomass, and we also understood how to interpret a pyramid of energy. And so we have also talked about the carbon cycle and the importance of forests and ocean as carbon sinks. Okay, so in today's lesson, we are going to talk about pollution. Okay, and as well as we'll end it off with talking about how we can conserve our planet. So the first learning objective is that we need to evaluate the effects of water pollution by sewage. Okay, there are two types of sewage, two types of pollution, and the first one will be sewage, right? Water pollution by sewage, and the second will be insecticide. So what exactly is pollution? Pollution is the addition of a substance into an environment where it has harmful effects. Right? For example, carbon dioxide can be seen as a pollution or a pollutant because if there's too much of it, it can cause harmful side effects such as global warming. Let's talk about sewage. Now take a look at this picture. Right, you see that there's many different activities that are being done in this area. Right? For example, there's a house, there's factories, there's agriculture, and there's waste products. So what normally happens in your houses, right? You go and go to the toilet, you pass some motion, and your feces is, released into the sewage, right? So in countries which don't have a proper sewage system, the water that comes from the toilets in the houses might just be deposited directly into the river. How might that affect the river? Right, firstly, we know that sewage contains a lot of bacteria. And so this bacteria can contaminate the water and can cause diseases. Right? Some people will even have to drink the water that's from the river. How about in the factory? Factories produce a lot of toxic products, right? And so these toxic products, if they're not treated and they're pumped directly into the river, it will cause a catastrophe, right? It'll kill all the animal life and plant life in the river. How about in the agriculture? What do farmers need to grow plants? Right? They need fertilizers. And we know that fertilizers can also affect the organisms that are found in the river. Solid waste, these include things like bottle caps, things like plastic straws, right? If these go into the river, this can also disrupt marine life. Pause for what? So it is very important that we treat our sewage water from our homes and our factories in sewage treatment plants before we release them into the ocean. Let's take a look at one particular plant in Singapore. This is known as the Ulu Pandan Sewage Treatment Plant. You can probably find it, right? If you go to Jurong, it's actually quite near to Jurong, you can go to Ulu Pandan. And this is where the water is treated, right, in our country. There's many other treatment plants, right? For example, we also have New Water, right? And we have other treatment plants in Singapore. Now, why do we need to treat our water? Firstly, untreated sewage can contain disease-causing bacteria, such as cholera, right? And this cholera, it will affect the drinking water. People who drink cholera will fall ill. They will get this disease known as cholera, right? And so what the cholera does is that it makes the person vomit and pass motion uncontrollably. So they will lose too much water and they might die from dehydration, right? That's why we say that people will fall sick if a country does not clean its sewage properly. Now, the second major problem that can be caused by untreated sewage will be this thing known as eutrophication, also known as algae bloom. Let's take a look at this picture. Now, we know that fertilizer helps plants to grow. So when plants grow, they actually need this thing called phosphates. They need phosphates and they also need nitrates. Untreated sewage sometimes contains this kind of chemicals, right? These chemical elements, phosphate and nitrates. So let's say that there's phosphorus and nitrogen that's being pumped directly into a river. How might this affect the algae? Algae is a kind of microorganism that is able to do photosynthesis. And so if they also receive this phosphorus and nitrogen, they will have an algae bloom, which means that they will spread across the entire surface of the water. and this will block out the sun and also prevent oxygen from dissolving into the water. How will that affect the aquatic life? Firstly, without sunlight, aquatic plants are unable to perform photosynthesis. Therefore, they will not be releasing sufficient oxygen gas into the water. Fish will then start to suffocate due to a lack of oxygen. This is because fish also need oxygen to breathe, right? They are not actually they are not breathing in water. They're actually absorbing the oxygen that is found in the water. So this will cause the aquatic animals and aquatic plants to die, right, from a lack of light and oxygen. Now this is known as eutrophication. Now furthermore, with a lack of oxygen and all these dead fishes and dead plants, there will be a lot of bacteria that will grow in the water, right? They also will break down the algae, and these bacteria, they actually consume up the oxygen in the water. So there's two ways why the fishes are dying. Firstly, it's because there's a lack of aquatic plants, and also because the bacteria is multiplying and they're absorbing up, or rather they are using up all the water all the oxygen that is found in the water. Okay, so this is known as algae bloom. So let's recap. The two reasons why we need to treat our sewage is because firstly, untreated sewage can cause diseases. Secondly, untreated sewage can cause eutrophication, also known as algae bloom. Okay, so that is, in short, a very simple and very easy way of why sewage has to be treated. Let's now talk about the way that Singapore does its treatment, water treatment. Okay, so we actually use this microorganism in sewage treatment, and this is known as environmental biotechnology. Now, how are bacteria used inside a sewage treatment plant? This technology, known as environmental biotechnology, it refers to a technology we should have repeated ourselves a lot, to use biological organisms such as bacteria to keep an environment clean and healthy, and sewage is treated in water treatment plants. So there are two types of bacteria here. The first type, we'll call it as the aerobic bacteria. Do you still remember what the word aerobic means? That's right. Aerobic means having to do with oxygen. Then what about anaerobic? It means without oxygen. So let's go through this process of how our sewage water is treated. Firstly, the sewage is pumped from our houses and our factories into the first tank. Right? These are all different tanks. Right? There are 6 different tanks here. So the first tank is called the grid screen. Right? It's just basically a filter. Okay, so it's just like it's a grill basically, right? Metal bars. And these metal bars, they actually block off large particles from entering and only allow the water to enter, right? The sewage water to enter. Because there are a lot of large particles, right? For example, in the longkang, you might find some stones, some sticks, etc., etc. Right? So all these have to be filtered and removed. Hold on. So once the sewage has been, once the large particles has been removed from the sewage water, it will then be pumped into the primary settling tank. So the word settling, right, it should remind you of your chemistry. When you talk about settling, it means that some large insoluble particles are settling to the bottom. So the things like the feces particles and other solids, right, they will sink down to the bottom and they turn into this thing known as sludge, which is like a brown, sticky substance. Above it, we find the sewage water, okay, which we will call the liquid. And so what happens to the sewage water is that it will then be pumped into the next tank, known as the activated sludge process. I don't really know why it's called activated sludge, but the reason is because they do something to activate the bacteria. That's what I heard. Okay, I'm not very sure about this. Okay, now what I do know is that there will be aerobic bacteria that will be pumped, or rather added into this tank. This bacteria, right, it will be able to perform aerobic respiration to break down the pollutants that are found in the sewage water into harmless products. How do they do that? They actually perform aerobic respiration. The bacteria contains certain enzymes that are able to break down these pollutants. And so when you pump oxygen, you see these bubbles here? When you pump oxygen and you mix it together, right, then this bacteria will start to do aerobic respiration, and during this process, they will start to break down the waste products into their harmless substances. Okay, so that is the reason why aerobic bacteria is useful. Okay, so subsequently, this sewage will then be pumped into the next tank, which is called the final settling tank. Now, once again, you see the word settling, that means that something is going to sink down to the bottom. In this case, you see the red lines. That means that the bacteria is settling down to the bottom, and so this aerobic bacteria will be removed and is actually returned back into the previous tank to recycle it, right? So I can save costs and everything. So subsequently, this water, which is purified, it's a bit more purified. It's still not safe to drink yet, but it's more purified. Most of the pollutants have been already removed by the aerobic bacteria. It will then be pumped towards the new water or disinfection tank. Okay, so what's new water? New water is a process where they will disinfect the water that we use using ultraviolet light. Okay, if you recall in our chapter on mutation, right, when you shine an ultraviolet light on an organism, it can cause damage to their DNA. And in the same way, if you shine the ultraviolet light on things like viruses or bacteria, you actually destroy them by damaging their DNA. Okay, then subsequently from new water, it can either be drank, you can drink new water. It can also be pumped to the factories to be used as water, fresh, clean water, or even to houses. Okay, so that is the first thing. That's what happens to the liquid above. Now, what happens to the sludge below? Actually, sludge is pumped down into another tank at the bottom, which is called the anaerobic bacteria tank. Okay, now this anaerobic bacteria also has another name known as denitrifying. What do you think denitrifying means? That's right. It means to remove the nitrates that are found inside this sludge over here. So do you remember why we have to remove the nitrates? That is because of algae bloom, right? If you leave the nitrates inside and you pump it out into the river, then the algae will start to bloom, and that'll be bad for the environment. So these anaerobic bacteria, they actually are able to perform anaerobic respiration. They also have enzymes that are able to remove nitrates from the compounds, and then they really turn it into nitrogen gas, which is then released into the environment. Okay, so subsequently this sludge will then be disposed of. Okay, and so you can read through this thing one more time. I'll just slowly move through it. You can pause the video and read through it. And what is important to remember in this whole explanation is what are the functions of the two types of bacteria. Okay, so let's talk about it one more time. Aerobic bacteria, it contains enzymes that break down pollutants into non-pollutants during the process of aerobic respiration, and this requires oxygen. Okay, then what about the anaerobic bacteria? The anaerobic bacteria, they digest sludge without oxygen. They actually remove the nitrates from the sludge and turn it to nitrogen. Okay, so I would like you now to pause the video and answer this question. Explain how sewage treatment uses biotechnology to improve water quality. Right, basically it's more or less whatever is here, just need you to practice copying it down and writing it down so that you can understand it better. Okay, so I'm just going to zoom through because this is a video. You can always pause and rewind if you need to. And I want to talk about the next form of pollution. And the next form of pollution is known as insecticides. Now, what is insecticide? Insecticide is actually a very specific type of pesticide that is used by farmers. Right? We know that farmers grow crops and they do not want insects to eat their crops. For example, as you can see in this picture, these are aphids. Aphids would eat things like cabbages, things like your corn, and they'll damage your crops, and the farmers can't sell them. So farmers will use insecticides to kill the insects. However, some of these insecticides are what you call as non-biodegradable, right? So non-biodegradable, you can think of it like a plastic bag. It means that if you leave a plastic bag on the ground or in the environment, you can come back to it 10 years later and you'll still see that same plastic bag there, right? It's not broken down. In the same way, these insecticides, they cannot be broken down. They will actually remain inside the soil or the water for many years. And this will cause a problem, which is known as bioaccumulation. Okay, hold on. Okay, so this problem is known as bioaccumulation, which is the gradual accumulation of substances such as pesticides in an organism. Okay, now we know what accumulation means. For example, if I say I'm accumulating money, that means that I'm trying to gather up more and more money, right? So bioaccumulation is basically more and more of these harmful substances inside an organism. Okay, let's talk about how this happens. When a pesticide pollutes the soil or water, it will enter into the bodies of producers like plants or plankton. Okay, so if you can see here, there's algae. Why does the algae use water? What process is happening in the algae? That's right, photosynthesis. Remember, photosynthesis requires three things: water, carbon dioxide, and light energy. So this water, which might contain a small percentage of mercury, a small concentration of mercury, will actually be absorbed into the algae. Then the insects start to eat the algae, insects eating the insects, fish eat the insect, and the fish eat the fish, and then humans eat the fish. And throughout this entire process, the level or concentration of toxins starts to increase greatly. Right? Because you must remember that this is over a long period of time. Right? You're not just eating one fish, you're eating many fish over your lifetime. And the accumulated effect can be quite dangerous. So because the pesticide, it cannot be broken down, it actually passes through the food chain and it will increase in concentration. This is known as parts per million along the trophic level. Finally, it will accumulate in the bodies of the top consumers. For example, your apex predators, things like your humans, things like your lion, tiger, these are your apex predators, right? Usually the final consumer of the chain. And it will start to cause toxic effects. Let's look at one more example over here. We see that there's some kind of toxin, right? Let's say, for example, this is an insecticide. There's a non-biodegradable insecticide. It's in the water, right? This called ppm refers to parts per million. It's basically the number of particles that are found in a certain area, in a specific area. And so over time, right, these toxic particles can enter the body of the plankton. Let's say that a fish eats the plankton. It will start to accumulate these toxic substances in their body. This is because the fish will eat many plankton, right, over its lifetime, right? The fish doesn't live just for one day, it lives for at least a few years. So it's eating plankton, and over time, it starts to build up all these toxins in its body. That goes the same for the bird, which is the final consumer. The bird is eating the fish, and we see that the fish already has a high level of toxins in its blood. So when the bird eats the fish, it will then accumulate all these substances in its body, and this will cause harmful side effects. Let's take a look at some of these harmful side effects. Okay, take a look at this frog over here. What do you see is different about this frog? That's right. This frog has an extra tail. It was unable to develop properly from a tadpole to turn into a frog. How about you take a look at this over here? What's with this fish? Something strange about it, right? So what we see is that there's a tumor on the fish, right? What is a tumor? It's basically uncontrolled cell growth. So this is what leads to cancer, right? When there's an uncontrolled cell, it starts to multiply and it turns into a cancer. Something wrong with this giraffe? The neck is twisted, which means that it was not able to develop properly. So these effects of bioaccumulation is quite dangerous. And you may say that, oh, it just affects animals, right? But no, it affects humans too. For example, these toxins, right, they actually can damage your blood-brain barrier, and that will cause blood to leak out from your brain. Then lead can also be stored in your bones, and this will be damaging for your bones because lead should not belong in your bones, right? Things like calcium, things like phosphate, that should belong in your bones, but lead, no. Okay, renal. Do you still remember what renal means? What is it linked to? Like, for example, if I say renal artery or renal vein, that means your kidney. Okay, so there could be kidney renal dysfunction, defective reproductive system, and other problems. So the effect of bioaccumulation can be very random, right? It really affects different animals in different ways, because this will cause mutations. Do you still remember your topic on mutagens, right? Things that change the DNA, right? That change the sequence of the nucleotides, or even change the number of the chromosomes, right? That cause mutations in the cells. Okay, so just as a recap, we have talked about pollution, in insecticides, and we'll talk about pollution in sewage, right? Water pollution in sewage. Okay, so these are the two major types of pollution which we must avoid. Finally, let's end off this chapter by talking about the reasons for conservation of a species with reference to the maintenance of biodiversity and how this is done through the management of fisheries and the management of timber production. Okay, so what does the word conservation mean? It means to protect. What does biodiversity mean? It means the number of species in a certain environment. For example, if I say the biodiversity of the sea, that refers to how many different species, right? Be they plants or animals or even insects or even other things, right? Amoeba, all these kind of things. How many different species are there in that environment? Okay, I would like you to go to YouTube now and watch this video called "Will the Ocean Ever Run Out of Fish?" I'm not able to play this YouTube video on my channel because of copyrights, right? So I will need you to go there and watch it for yourself. You can pause the video now and watch it. Okay, now that you've watched the video, let's talk about overfishing and management of fisheries. Now in the video, you have seen many examples of why overfishing is dangerous. What does overfishing mean? Overfishing simply means catching too much fish at one time. And if you damage the breeding population, then the fish will become too depleted to recover. That also means that once they are too depleted, they will eventually become extinct. Right? At first they become endangered, then they become extinct. Extinct means that there's none of these species left on Earth. So we need to maintain the biodiversity of the sea, which means the number of different species in the sea, by helping to manage how fishing is conducted. Okay, firstly, in the video you may have seen a certain kind of net that is drifting at the bottom of the ocean, right? It's damaging the corals, it's dragging all kinds of fishes. So what kind of net is that? That would be known as a drift nets. Okay, so there's two types of nets that I'd like to tell you about. Firstly, we have the drift net. Right, this kind of net is basically like a tennis, right? It's like a tennis net or badminton net where you're just pulling along the sea, right? And you're trapping all these fishes inside the net. Okay, this is very, very effective because you are able to trap a lot of fishes. However, this can be damaging for the biodiversity because it's too efficient. It's too efficient and you are just like capturing too much of the fish. And so the fish will not be able to recover and they'll not be able to repopulate themselves. The second kind of net is what you call as a trawl net. Okay, these trawl nets are basically nets which are trawling along the seafloor. And let's say that, okay, let's say in this picture you see two different fishes, right? This fish and this fish. Let's say, for example, you only want this fish, right? The one in blue, and you don't really need the red fish, right? However, this net does not differentiate between the different kind of fishes, so they just catch everything, right? And so all these extra fishes is what I call as the bycatch. Bycatch are fishes that the fishermen do not need, but they are catching it anyway. And what do they do with this bycatch? They actually just throw it out of the boat. However, by the time that the fishes have already been put out on the boat and then they're processed and everything, and they're thrown back to the sea, they'll be dead. Okay, so this is a very harmful practice because it also damages the corals and the aquatic plants. As this net is dragging through the ocean floor, it actually crushes the corals, the aquatic plants, and this will reduce the total number of plants in the water, in the ocean. Okay, so those are the two types of nets. Okay, right over here, that we should ban the use of trawl nets or drift nets, which will trap all forms of marine life. Secondly, we need to use nets with the correct holes or larger holes. Okay, why do we do that? Now, we know that when you eat fish, you want to eat an adult fish, right? Like nobody wants to just eat like baby fish because it's like not appetizing and it's not useful. So the fisherman should be trying to use the net with the right size so that only adult fish of the kind of fish that they want to catch will be caught, and do not catch the young fish. This will give the young fish enough time to grow and turn into adults. we need to regulate the number of ships fishing. How this is done is by giving a fishing permit. So let's say, for example, the government only issues like 100 fishing permit. So there are only like 100 boats that can fish at one time. We need to limit the period of fishing, which means that because fishers also have seasons, right? They have like the breeding season, the mating season, and all kinds of different seasons. So if the fishers are like breeding in like January, that's the wrong time to disturb them, right? You need them to breed and to multiply so that there's enough fishes. So maybe from January all the way until let's say June, no fishing is allowed. But from June to December, then that's okay. You can go and fish. Alright, so that's called limiting the period of fishing. Next, we need to ban fishing of endangered species. What are endangered species? These are species that are very close to extinction. Perhaps there's only 10 of these fish left in the ocean, only 100 left. Right? If you were to remove any one of them, it'll be very dangerous and that species might become extinct. Lastly, we can allow endangered species to grow inside hatcheries. Hatcheries are just like small little farms or safe space that the fishes can grow. Okay, so if we do these methods, that will continue to allow us to fish, right, have a certain level, but it also allows us to maintain the biodiversity of the sea, right, the number of different species of animals and plants in the sea. Okay, make a guess, right? What is the total number of animals and plants that are actually becoming extinct every single day? Do you think it's 10, 20? It's actually 150, right? There's quite a lot of different species that are becoming extinct every single day. So, right, this is why we actually need to take care of our Earth. Okay, now let's talk about deforestation also. Okay, so I once again need your help, right, to go to YouTube, and I'll need you to search for deforestation, and I'll need you to watch this video, right? Climate 101 deforestation. Okay, once you're done, you can come back to this video. Okay, you're done with the video. Great. So here is a picture showing a lumberjack. Okay, what is a lumberjack? It's a person who makes his living by cutting down trees. So as you can see, when you cut down trees, there's some significance in this picture, right? The more trees you cut, the faster we are building our grave. This is, by the way, a coffin. Okay, so what is deforestation? Deforestation is the cutting down of trees over a large area, and this can be for farming or for development. Okay, we all know what farming is, right? So basically, right, when you need space, you're gonna cut down the tree so you can grow more things like rice, things like corn, etc. Development means like you want to build more houses, more schools, more factories, right? These are the kind of development. Lastly, what is timber? Timber is basically wood, right? So what do we use wood for? It can be used for construction, it can be used for paper, it can also be used for furniture. Now, when you cut down the forest or the trees, you're not only affecting the trees themselves, you are also affecting the animals and insects that are living in the trees. So things like your monkeys, ants, right? Even larger animals like tigers, they live in the forest, right? And so without their home, they might go extinct. And so we need to maintain the biodiversity by managing how forests are being used. Firstly, we should allow young trees more time to grow. Right? We know that trees take a long time to grow. Right? It's not something that you just plant and the next day just sprouts out overnight. So we need to actually plan and we need to grow more trees that are being cut down. So if every year a country cuts down 1 million trees, that means that it should plant at least 2 million, right? Or maybe double or even triple what it's cutting down. Right? This is because obviously not all the trees will grow like to maturity. For some of them are going to be eaten by insects, some of them will just die for some reason. So actually you need to plant much more trees than you're cutting down. Next, we should set aside land as forest reserves. Okay, the word reserves means that you can't touch it, right? It's basically protected by the law. So for example, in Singapore, we don't call it forest reserve, but we call it as nature reserves. What is one common nature reserve that you know about? Okay, so in Singapore, we have some nature reserves. And the most popular one, of course, would be our Bukit Timah Nature Reserve, which you probably have been there before. Next most popular one would be the Central Catchment Nature Reserve, right? This is the one that is near MacRitchie, where people have that nice reservoir to run around. Okay, so go there, check it out. All the trees there are protected. You can't just take a axe or something and just go and start chopping trees. You'll be sent to jail. Okay, lastly, we need to ban illegal deforestation. Okay, so let's end off this whole syllabus by talking about world population. Now we know that in 1950, there's a certain population. What's the population? 3 billion, right? And then it starts to grow to about 5.5, 5.6 maybe? 5.5 billion in year 2000. Do you know what is the world population right now? Okay, where's my worldometer? Okay, so this is a worldometer. It's currently retrieving the data of the world population. Okay, so right now the population is about 8 billion, 8.05 billion. And this is, you can see the number going up, going down slightly. This is because people are being born every single day, right? People are dying all the time. And so there's population growth. Okay, you can even go and see the top few countries, right? Under where Singapore would be, right? Largest population, and Singapore. Okay, we are number 114 in terms of population. So not the smallest country, but pretty small. Okay, so as the population increases, right, the demand for food will also grow. And so more forests will have to be cut down to create more farms. However, this will reduce the biodiversity of animals. We also need more fish, right? So overfishing might occur and reduce the biodiversity of the sea. Humans, right, we release a lot of greenhouse gases because of our vehicles and because of our factories. And so when there are more humans, there are more greenhouse gases. There's more waste and more pollution. So what we have to do is to control these kind of things by building more treatment plants, right? For example, more water treatment plants, more landfills. Better education and technology will be needed to counteract these issues. Now in Singapore, we have a certain landfill. Do you know what is this landfill called? This landfill is known as Pulau Semakau. Okay, and you can see, right, that over the years, the Pulau Semakau landfill is starting to fill up. Right? This year 2000, it's 2003, 2008, you can see that it's getting quite full. Now, do you know why it's turning green? Actually, because we are planting trees on top of it. Okay, so this part, what are these things, right? These are actually the ashes of your waste. When you have all these waste products, you throw them down the rubbish bin, then they are actually compacted and crushed, and they are burnt, they are incinerated, and they are turned into ash, and these ashes are put at Pulau Semakau. So it's 2012, 2015, 2019, right? You can see that actually there's not much space left. How many more years? How many more years? Pulau Semakau. Okay. Right, it says in just 15 years, right? In year this 2020, right? In just 15 years, so 2035, Pulau Semakau will be completely filled. Which is why we actually should try to reduce our waste. Don't buy things that we don't need. Don't eat things that we are very wasteful, keep tapao or the plastic here and there for no reason, right? Okay, and that is more or less the end of the syllabus. Okay, what I want you to do now is I want you to go to your TYS, your 10-year series, find this question. I'd like you to try this question for yourself, right? This one is talking about the roles of the aerobic bacteria and the denitrifying bacteria, and etc. etc. Okay, so other than this, of course, can you just finish up the entire 10-year series for ecology? Okay, and then you'll submit to me when you next see me. Okay, so congratulations, you have finished the syllabus. Now it's time to focus and to start studying. Okay, if you have any questions about all these things that I just went through, do approach me in school and I'll be more than happy to go through it again with you. Okay, thanks. Have a good national day. Bye-bye.